Hello and welcome to Rescue, Pam Shepherd Ministries. In this video, we shall look at a controversial subject known as speaking in tongues. This is also referred to as glossolalia, unknown tongues, and ecstatic tongues. A lot of people view this topic as a sacred cow, almost untouchable. But in Rescue, standing on truth is essential, and we examine important spiritual topics, including this one. Millions of Christians around the world practice speaking in tongues, and the number is increasing daily. So it's important we ask ourselves, where is the source of these tongues? We have three options: God, man, or fallen angels. Since tongues is a supernatural phenomenon, it eliminates man as the source. We are then left with God or the fallen angels. If it is from God, there are two glaring issues that prove otherwise. The way people receive tongues today bears no resemblance to how the first church received theirs. There's also lack of bona fide interpreters. People are unable to interpret their own tongues and they can't find genuine interpreters. This leaves us with the fallen angels. What could be their motive? Well, a major one could be to use people as they speak in unknown tongues to decree and declare their will, purposes, agenda to be done on earth rather than that of God. Key points to consider when analyzing tongues. We live in a time of deception, so it's good to heed the words and warnings of Jesus. Also, it is crucial to rightly divide the word. Avoid assumptions and never read the Bible out of context. It is good to have a social, cultural perspective to avoid confusion. Two main books have been used out of context to defend the practice of speaking in tongues, namely the Book of Acts and 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and 14. We'll use the same scripture and present a position that will hopefully shed light on whether tongues should be used as a prayer language. We start with the Book of Acts, and as with every scripture, we'll look at it in context with cultural and historical variables. In the time of the early church, the community was very diverse. You could find a Mede, a Jew, a Cretan, a Roman, a Judean, just to name a few. There could be at least 17 different languages in one place. As this crowd gathered to hear the disciples, they heard them preach the wonderful works of God. The wonderful works of God is the gospel of Jesus Christ, and they heard this in their own tongue. So we can see here the major purpose of tongues was to preach the gospel. It was also a supernatural sign to unbelievers that God was with the disciples. In the Corinthian letters, Paul wrote this letter to correct the believers in Corinth who were misusing tongues as a prayer language and for self-edification. We can see this in chapter 12, 13, and 14. Paul's letter to the Corinth believers was different from the ones he sent to the Romans and Ephesians because Paul was responding to a letter he initially received from them. He points out that Chloe's household informed him of divisive issues that were going on. So when you read the book of Corinthians, keep this in mind. Whose words are you reading? Are you reading the words from Chloe's household, or the words from the Corinthians, or Paul's own words? In this letter, Paul let the believers know he appreciated their zeal, but he cautioned them to not be carried away by dumb idols that they once worshipped. Prior to converting to Christianity, they had a pagan practice that involved the use of tongues to worship Greek gods and goddesses. He gently told them if they want to be zealous, don't seek a self-gratifying gift like a prayer language, but a gift like interpretation so they can benefit the whole church. Irony is, the scripture that Paul used to correct the Corinthians is now being used to justify it today. Paul was a traveling evangelist, and through the help of tongues, he reached sinners of different languages with the gospel. Yet you'll find today charismatic evangelists who speak in tongues but need the help of translators when speaking to people of different communities. Something is wrong here. Could it be that tongues has ceased as Paul said it would? In the next video, we'll continue analyzing this topic by looking at it from a historical perspective. We shall also use the teachings of Jesus that a good tree cannot bear bad fruit and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit, and you shall also know them by their fruit. One interesting note that you will see is that tongues had ceased for 19 centuries. If you're looking for a fellowship that arms you with truth and helps you to be undeceived, contact Rescue today at 518-477-5759. You can email rescueonfb@icloud.com. Also visit www.aboutrescue.com.
Created using Powtoon.